Greetings YouTube. Today I'm going to review the latest book I've read. I am Jackie Chan, My Life in Action, and this was written by Jackie Chan and Jeff Yang. I think that Jeff Yang was there mostly to help Mr. Chan because his command of the English language isn't all that great. One of the things I liked about this book from page 1 is that you could really hear Jackie Chan's voice. I've heard him speak, and it very much felt like this was Jackie Chan telling me a story. And it made the entire book enjoyable. I will admit that there was a little editing that probably could have been done. There were some spots where I think that they gave a little detail and things that you didn't need, and a couple of spots where I would kind of wish we had more detail. But overall, I think if you cut about 10% of the book, it would have been a tighter story. Well, that's just me. This starts from the beginning of his life, actually a brief discussion of his parents before he was born. And apparently, Mr. Chan, his mother was pregnant for almost 12 months. And when he was delivered via cesarean, he weighed 12 pounds. That's a big baby. And his parents had had him in Hong Kong, and in 1954, he's 10 years older than I am. And it was interesting because as an adult, he came and learned that he had half siblings, that his father had 3 boys from a marriage that had taken place before the Japanese invasion of China. And his mother had at least 1 daughter from that same era. And he never went into any further details. He was just like, my family wants to keep these things in the past, and that's where they remained, which I find an amazing characteristic. He says that I'm not an overly curious person, and I think that's a vast understatement not to want to know that you have 4 siblings, and who knows if you have more. That's a profound lack of curiosity, but that's just me. But the story covers his upbringing in a French embassy. His parents were the servants of the ambassador. He's eventually training in a classic Chinese opera. His move into stunt work at 17, full-time. His eventual discovery as a actor in his own right, martial arts star, and his 2 failed attempts, an eventual 3rd successful attempt at breaking into the American market. Even though by the time he finally made that break with Rumble in the Bronx, he was the biggest action star on the entire continent of Asia. He was bar none. And yet in America, almost nobody knew about him. I had known about him from some of his work in his earlier martial arts films. But again, I was into that kind of a genre, so I guess I could have said I was part of that cult following he had. I knew who he was. He wasn't a complete stranger. But to the average American, prior to that era, the Rush Hour franchise, nobody knew who he was, which is astounding because he was so popular. But the story covers the details of his early films, of his trials and tribulations, the woman he meets and eventually marries, and they have a son together. I believe they only have the 1 child. And when this book was printed in 1999, his son would have been, I think, 15. And also in the book, at the end of the book, there is a nice little section where he talks about his 10 favorite stunts, his 10 favorite fight scenes, and an entire filmography going from 1962, when he was working as a child extra, all the way up through 1999, when he worked on Rush Hour. So this is the complete package. This has got everything you need if you want to know about Jackie Chan up through that time period. So I recommend it if you are a Jackie Chan fan. Now, I do have to bring up one thing. When he studied classic Chinese opera, he studied under the command of an instructor known as Master Yu. And there is no pleasant way I can say this. Master Yu was a child abuser. The man beat 7-year-old children with a stick until they bled. He hit the children so frequently that were under his control that they didn't notice it unless they didn't get hit that day. And the most horrible thing about this is that Mr. Chan internalized this abuse and commented on 2 different occasions in the book. Once that the current Chinese opera wasn't as good as the Chinese opera from his era because they weren't allowed to beat the students any longer. And he felt that their quality had slacked off because of it, because laws had now been passed making that activity illegal. And he then talks at a later point where he says that Chinese opera had changed because the techniques of the past were archaic, even barbaric. Yes, they were. They were, in fact, barbaric. I found these chapters very difficult to read because I have a severe issue with child abuse. And that's what this man did. He beat children with sticks. There is no excuse for this. If the only way to maintain the existence of your art is to beat children, then the world does not need your art. But if you can look past that, and you want to read the autobiography of Jackie Chan up through 1999, I do recommend this book. Just be aware that those chapters are in there I wish I had known before I read the book.